Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're doing something a little different. It's late, maybe you're lying in bed, maybe you're winding down after a long day, and you just need something to listen to while the world gets quiet. So grab a blanket, put your phone down if you want, and just let these stories wash over you. They're about relationships, betrayal, family drama, shocking confessions, and sometimes just the messy reality of being human. And while I read them, there's some peaceful Minecraft gameplay in the background to help you breathe, relax, and maybe drift off to sleep. Before we start, I just want to say thank you for being here. Whether you're a long-time subscriber or this is your first time, I appreciate you spending this time with me. These stories can be heavy, but there's something comforting about knowing that other people go through difficult things too. You're not alone in whatever you're dealing with. So let's get into it. Our first story tonight comes from someone who discovered that the person they trusted most had been lying to them for years, and the way they found out was absolutely devastating. I discovered my husband of 12 years had a second family. I'm 41 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I had a pretty normal life. We had 2 kids together, a nice house in the suburbs, and what I believed was a solid marriage. Sure, he travelled for work a lot, sometimes 2 weeks out of every month, but I never questioned it. He worked in sales for a medical equipment company, and the travel seemed to come with the territory. The way I found out was almost laughably mundane. I was organising our home office because we were getting ready to sell the house and move somewhere bigger. In the back of his desk drawer, underneath some old tax documents, I found a phone. Not his regular phone, but an older model that still had some battery left. I don't know why I turned it on. Call it intuition. Call it curiosity, but something told me to look. The phone was full of messages to someone named Rachel, and they weren't just friendly messages. They were love notes, planning messages, photos. Photos of him with a woman I'd never seen before and 2 children I'd never met. The oldest looked about 8 years old. The math hit me immediately. He'd been with this woman almost as long as we'd been married. I sat on the floor of that office for I don't know how long. An hour, maybe, just staring at the phone, scrolling through years of lies. There were birthday parties I didn't know about, vacations I thought he was taking alone, holidays where he'd told me he was visiting his sick mother but was actually with them. His mother had passed away 5 years ago. I'd been at the funeral, but apparently so had Rachel. When he came home that night, I didn't say anything at first. I watched him walk through the door, kiss me on the cheek, ask what was for dinner like he did every night. And I realised I was looking at a complete stranger. This person I'd built a life with, had children with, shared a bed with for over a decade, was someone I didn't know at all. I finally showed him the phone during dinner. Just placed it on the table between us while our kids were upstairs doing homework. The colour drained from his face so fast I thought he might pass out. He tried to deny it at first, said it was an old phone from before we met, that those messages were from a relationship that ended years ago. But I'd seen the timestamps. I'd seen the photos dated from last month. He broke down crying eventually, admitted everything, said he'd been living 2 lives and didn't know how to stop. He said he loved both of us, that he never meant to hurt anyone, that he'd been planning to tell me eventually. Eventually, after 12 years, after 2 families, after building an entire parallel life. The thing that destroyed me the most wasn't even the cheating, it was finding out that Rachel knew about me. She knew he was married, she knew about our kids, and she stayed with him anyway. They'd made a conscious decision together to build a life on top of the one I thought was real. I was the only one living in the dark. I filed for divorce the following week. He begged me to reconsider, said we could go to counselling, that he would end things with Rachel for good this time. But I couldn't look at him anymore. Every time I saw his face, I saw all the lies. I saw all the times he'd held me and told me he loved me while texting her from the bathroom. I saw all the business trips that were actually family vacations with his other children. My kids are taking it hard. They're 13 and 11, old enough to understand that something terrible happened, but too young to really process what their father did. I've tried to shield them from the worst of it, but they have questions I don't know how to answer. How do you explain to your children that their father has 2 other kids he's been hiding? That they have siblings they've never met? The hardest part now is rebuilding. Everything I thought I knew about my life turned out to be a lie. My marriage, my husband's job, his family relationships, all of it was built on deception. I don't know how to trust anyone anymore. I second-guess everything. When friends say they're busy, I wonder what they're really doing. When my own mother calls me, I find myself analysing her tone for hidden meanings. Some people have told me I should be grateful I found out now instead of 20 years from now, and I guess they're right in a way. But gratitude is hard to feel when your entire world has collapsed. When you realise that the person who was supposed to be your partner was actually a stranger playing a role. I'm in therapy now, trying to work through all of this. My therapist says healing takes time and that what I'm feeling is completely normal. But normal feels like such a strange word when nothing about your life makes sense anymore. I used to know who I was. I was a wife, a mother, someone with a stable home life. Now I don't know what I am. Just someone trying to figure out how to exist in a world that turned out to be nothing like I thought. If you're going through something similar, I want you to know that it gets a little easier each day. Not better necessarily, but easier. You learn to breathe again. You learn to exist without the weight of someone else's lies pressing down on you every second. And eventually, maybe, you learn to trust yourself again. Because that's what betrayal really destroys. Not just your trust in others, but your trust in your own judgment. That story really shows how someone can completely destroy another person's reality. 12 years of living a double life. 2 separate families, neither one knowing the full truth. The level of deception required to maintain something like that is almost unfathomable, and yet it happens more often than we'd like to believe. Let's move on to our next story, which involves a different kind of betrayal. This one comes from someone whose best friend crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. My best friend of 15 years slept with my fiancée and then blamed me for not being attentive enough. I'm 29 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. Great job, wonderful fiancé, and a best friend I'd known since middle school. We'd been through everything together: puberty, breakups, college, career changes. I genuinely believed she would be standing next to me at my wedding as my maid of honour. I met my fiancé David 4 years ago at a work conference. We hit it off immediately, moved in together after a year, and got engaged last spring. The wedding was supposed to be in October. I'd already put deposits down on the venue, the caterer, the photographer. Everything was planned. My best friend, who I'll call Sarah, had always been supportive of my relationship with David. At least, that's what I thought. She came to our engagement party, helped me pick out wedding dresses, listened to me stress about seating arrangements. She was always there. What I didn't know was that she and David had been meeting behind my back for months. It started innocently enough, according to what they told me later. He'd text her to ask for gift ideas for me. She'd give him advice on things I might like. But somewhere along the line, those conversations became something else. I found out in the most cliché way possible. I came home early from a work trip because my flight got cancelled, and I managed to get on an earlier one. I didn't call ahead to let David know because I wanted to surprise him. Well, I was the one who got surprised. When I walked into our apartment, I could hear them before I saw them. The bedroom door was closed, but not all the way. I stood in the hallway for what felt like forever, just listening, trying to convince myself I was misunderstanding what was happening. But there was no misunderstanding. I pushed open the door, and they both scrambled to cover themselves. Sarah actually had the nerve to look annoyed, like I'd interrupted something and was being rude about it. David started apologizing immediately, tripping over his words, saying it wasn't what it looked like when it was very clearly exactly what it looked like. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just felt hollow, like someone had reached inside my chest and scooped out everything that made me feel alive. I walked to our closet, grabbed a suitcase, and started packing my things. Neither of them moved to stop me at first. Then Sarah started talking, and what she said was somehow worse than finding them together. She said this wouldn't have happened if I'd been paying more attention to David. She said I'd been so focused on wedding planning and work that I'd neglected him. She actually blamed me for their affair, said she was just filling a void that I'd created. David didn't contradict her. He just stood there, nodding along, like she was making valid points, like I deserved to come home to my fiancé in bed with my best friend because I'd been busy planning our wedding. I left that night and haven't been back since. I stayed with my sister for a few weeks until I could find my own place. The wedding is obviously cancelled. I lost most of the deposits, which was thousands of dollars I'll never get back, but that's not what hurts the most. What hurts is losing 15 years of friendship in a single moment. All those memories we made, all those inside jokes, all those late-night conversations about our hopes and dreams, none of it mattered in the end. She threw it all away for someone she'd only known for 4 years, and she didn't even have the decency to feel bad about it. They're still together, by the way, David and Sarah. Apparently their affair was true love, and they couldn't help their feelings. At least that's what I've heard through mutual friends. I've blocked both of them on everything, so I don't know firsthand. But the thought of them building a life together on top of the wreckage of mine makes me physically sick. The worst part is how it's changed me. I used to be trusting, maybe too trusting. I believed people when they said they cared about me. I took friendships at face value. Now I question everything. When someone is nice to me, I wonder what they want. When a friend spends time with my current boyfriend, who I met after all this happened, I feel my anxiety spike, even though he's given me no reason to doubt him. My therapist says this is a normal response to trauma, that having your trust violated by the two people closest to you can rewire how you see the world, but knowing it's normal doesn't make it feel any better. I don't want to be this suspicious, guarded person. I want to be who I was before all this happened, but that person doesn't exist anymore. If you've been through something similar, I want you to know that the people who hurt you aren't worth the energy you spend thinking about them. They made their choices, and those choices reflect who they are, not who you are. You didn't deserve what happened. No amount of being busy or stressed or imperfect justifies betrayal. That's something I have to keep reminding myself every single day. That story is just gut-wrenching. 15 years of friendship destroyed, a relationship demolished, and then having the audacity to blame the victim for their own betrayal. Some people really have no shame. Let's take a breather with something a little different. This next story is about family drama, but it's the kind that makes you shake your head at how petty people can be over the smallest things. My sister uninvited me from her wedding because I wouldn't change my hair colour. I'm 25 years old and have had brightly coloured hair for most of my adult life. Currently, it's a deep purple that I absolutely love. It's part of my identity at this point, how I express myself, how I feel confident. I've had it various shades of blue, green, pink and purple for about 7 years now. My sister is 3 years older than me and has always been more traditional. She wears neutral colours, has natural brown hair, and generally follows a more conservative aesthetic. We've never had problems with our different styles before. She'd make comments sometimes about how she could never pull off my look, but I always took them as compliments. When she got engaged last year, I was thrilled for her. I was supposed to be a bridesmaid, which I was excited about, even though I'm not really a wedding person. The colour scheme was blush and gold, and I figured I'd just wear whatever dress she picked and be happy to support her. The problems started about 6 months before the wedding. She sent me a text asking if I'd be willing to dye my hair a natural colour for the ceremony. She said she didn't want my purple hair to distract from the aesthetic she was going for and that it would look weird in photos. I'll admit, my first instinct was to say no immediately, but I took a day to think about it because I wanted to be fair. This was her wedding, her day. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt like this was an unreasonable request. Dyeing my hair would require bleaching out the purple first, then colouring it brown, then dyeing it back to purple after, which would cause significant damage, not to mention the cost of all those salon visits. I called her to explain my concerns. I suggested alternatives, like maybe I could wear a wig, or stand at the end of the group so I wasn't as prominent in photos, or even just style my hair differently so it wasn't as noticeable. She rejected every suggestion. She said she didn't want fake hair in her photos and that if I really loved her, I would make this sacrifice for her one special day. That phrase stuck with me. If I really loved her. As if my hair colour was somehow a reflection of how much I cared about my sister. As if years of being there for her through breakups and job losses and family drama could be erased because I wouldn't permanently alter my appearance for a single day. I told her I wasn't willing to dye my hair, but that I would do anything else to make her day special. I offered to pay for my own hairstyling, to wear whatever makeup she wanted, to stay out of as many photos as possible. She said that wasn't good enough. 2 weeks later, I got a text from her saying that after careful consideration, she didn't think it would work for me to be in the wedding party anymore. She said she hoped I would still attend as a guest, but she needed bridesmaids who were willing to commit to her vision. I was devastated, not just because of the wedding, but because of what it revealed about how she saw me. My hair was more important to her than having her sister stand next to her on her wedding day. Aesthetics mattered more than family. Our parents tried to mediate. My mum suggested I just wear a wig to keep the peace, but I felt like that was rewarding my sister's behaviour. My dad said I should just dye my hair because it would grow back eventually, not understanding how much damage the process would actually cause. Neither of them seemed to grasp why this felt like such a violation. I ended up attending the wedding as a guest. It was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life, watching someone else stand where I should have been standing. Seeing my sister smile at bridesmaids she'd known for a fraction of the time she'd known me, knowing that my hair was the only reason I wasn't up there with her. She's married now, and our relationship has never recovered. We're civil at family events, but the closeness we had growing up is gone. I've tried to talk to her about it a few times, but she always says I'm the one who made the choice not to compromise, so I don't get to be upset about the consequences. Maybe she's right. Maybe I should have just worn the wig or found some other solution. But part of me still believes that love shouldn't come with conditions like that. That real family accepts you as you are, purple hair and all. That story really highlights how wedding planning can bring out the worst in people. Imagine prioritizing aesthetic perfection over having your own sister in your wedding party. Some people lose sight of what actually matters when they're planning what they think is supposed to be a perfect day. Our next story goes deeper into family dysfunction. This one involves secrets that were kept for decades and the fallout when they finally came to light. I found out at 42 that my dad isn't my biological father, and my entire family knew except me. This happened about 2 years ago, but I'm still processing it. I'm the kind of person who does ancestry DNA tests for fun, curious about heritage and all that. I thought it would be interesting to see where my family came from, maybe find some distant relatives. What I found instead was that the man who raised me, who I called Dad for over 4 decades, shares no DNA with me whatsoever. At first, I thought there must be some mistake. The DNA testing company must have mixed up samples or something. So I did another test with a different company. Same result. I didn't match with any of my dad's relatives, but I did match with a bunch of people I'd never heard of. I spent weeks agonizing over whether to say anything. Part of me wanted to just pretend I never saw the results and go on living my life, but I couldn't. The question was eating me alive. Who was my biological father? Did my mum have an affair? Was I the product of something even worse? I finally confronted my parents during a visit home. I tried to do it gently, showing them the DNA results and asking if there was something they wanted to tell me. The look that passed between them told me everything I needed to know. My mum started crying. My dad, the man who raised me, just looked tired, and then the truth came out. Apparently, my parents had struggled with infertility for years before having me. They went to a fertility clinic and used a sperm donor. This wasn't uncommon in the early 1980s, but what was different was how they handled it. Their doctor at the time recommended they never tell me or anyone else. He said children do better when they believe they're biologically related to both parents and that the secret should go to the grave. So they told everyone, including their own families, that I was conceived naturally, and everyone kept the secret. My aunts, my uncles, my grandparents who have since passed away. Everyone knew except me. I felt like I'd been living in a different reality than everyone around me. All those times, relatives had commented on how I looked like my dad or had his mannerisms. They were all lies. Conscious lies told to maintain a facade that I never asked to be part of. I wasn't angry at first. I was just stunned. But the anger came later. Not about the sperm donor part, that I could understand. My parents wanted a child and found a way to have one. The anger was about the secrecy. About being the only person in my entire extended family who didn't know the truth about my own origins. I started doing research, trying to find my biological father through the DNA matches I'd gotten. It took a few months, but I eventually tracked him down. He was a medical student when he donated, doing it for extra money like so many young people did back then. He's a retired physician now, living in another state, with a family of his own. I reached out to him, not sure what I was hoping for. Maybe some medical history, maybe just to see what he looked like. He was cautiously friendly, which I appreciated. He said he'd always wondered if any of his donations had resulted in children and was glad I'd found him. He shared his medical history and some photos, and we've exchanged a few emails since then. But here's the complicated part. Through the DNA database, I've also discovered I have at least 7 half-siblings, other children from this same donor. Some of them have reached out to me, wanting to connect. A few of us have even met in person. It's surreal, meeting adults who share your biology, but none of your history. We look alike in weird ways, but have completely different lives and personalities. My relationship with my parents has been strained since all this came out. They maintain they did what they thought was best at the time, and I believe them. But the betrayal still stings. I'm 44 now, and I spent 42 years not knowing something fundamental about who I am. That's a lot of time to spend living a partial truth. My dad, the one who raised me, has been the most hurt by all of this. I think he feels like my search for my biological father somehow diminishes his role as my dad. I've tried to reassure him that he'll always be my father in every way that matters, but I can see the pain in his eyes when the subject comes up. If there's a lesson in all this, it's that secrets have a way of surfacing eventually, and the longer they're kept, the more damage they do when they finally come out. I wish my parents had told me the truth when I was young enough to process it differently. I wish I hadn't had to find out through a test I did on a whim. I wish my entire family hadn't conspired to keep me in the dark about my own identity, but I'm working through it, slowly. I've met some amazing half-siblings I never would have known existed. I have a more complete medical history now, which has actually been helpful. And I'm learning that family is both biology and choice, and sometimes those things overlap and sometimes they don't. That story really shows how keeping secrets, even with good intentions, can cause so much damage in the long run. 42 years of not knowing your own origins. That's a lot of life lived under false pretenses, even if no one meant any harm by it. Let's shift to another story about trust being broken, but this time in a friendship that had lasted decades. My best friend of 20 years stole my inheritance and showed no remorse. I'm 38 years old, and until recently, I had someone I considered closer than family. We'll call her Michelle. Michelle and I met in high school and stayed close through college, career changes, marriages, divorces, everything. When I went through my divorce 3 years ago, she let me stay with her for 2 months while I got back on my feet. I would have done anything for her. My grandmother passed away last year after a long illness. She was 94 and had lived a full life, so while her death was sad, it wasn't unexpected. What I didn't expect was the inheritance she left me. Grandma wasn't wealthy by most standards, but she'd been quietly saving her whole life. When the will was read, I learned she'd left me just over $200,000. It was life-changing money for someone like me, enough to pay off my remaining debt, put a down payment on a house, and still have some left for emergencies. The money took a few months to actually reach me because of probate and legal processes. During that time, Michelle was one of the few people I confided in about the inheritance. I trusted her completely. She was excited for me, helped me look at houses online, discussed investment strategies. She seemed genuinely happy that something good was happening in my life. When the money finally came through, it went into a new account I'd set up specifically for it. I wanted to keep it separate from my regular finances until I figured out exactly what to do with it. The account was at a different bank than my regular checking, and I rarely even looked at it those first few weeks. I figured it was safe. Then one day, I logged in to check the balance before making an offer on a house I'd found. The account was empty. Not just low, but completely drained. Zero balance. I called the bank immediately, sure there had been some kind of error. What I learned instead was that the money had been transferred out in multiple transactions over the course of about 3 weeks. The account holder, meaning me supposedly, had authorized each transfer. Except I hadn't. I hadn't logged into that account since the money first arrived. I hadn't authorized anything. The bank launched an investigation. Police got involved, and eventually they traced the transfers to an account belonging to Michelle. She had stolen my login information during one of the many times she'd been at my house. She'd watched me enter passwords, memorize them, and use them to access my accounts. Then she'd slowly transferred the money to herself, probably hoping I wouldn't notice for a while. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. She said she needed the money more than I did. Her business had been struggling, she was behind on her mortgage, and she was about to lose everything. She said I would have given it to her if she'd asked, so she didn't see what the big deal was. I would not have given her $200,000. I would have helped her, sure. I would have lent her money within my means, but not my entire inheritance. Not everything my grandmother had spent decades saving. The police arrested her. She's currently facing charges for identity theft and grand larceny. I'll probably get some of the money back eventually, but not all of it. She'd already spent a significant portion by the time she was caught. What hurts more than the money is the betrayal. 20 years of friendship, gone. Someone I would have trusted with my life turned out to be someone who would steal from me without a second thought. And the way she justified it, like I owed her my inheritance because her life was harder than mine, like my grandmother's savings belonged to whoever needed them most, regardless of who they were actually left to. I've had to change every password, close accounts, basically rebuild my financial life from scratch. But the financial stuff can be recovered eventually. What can't be recovered is my ability to trust people the way I used to. I find myself suspecting everyone now, watching friends to see if they're memorizing my keystrokes, hiding my screens, never talking about money anymore. People keep telling me I should have known better than to share financial information, even with close friends. But how are you supposed to live if you can't trust anyone? How do you have relationships if you're constantly suspecting the worst of everyone around you? I don't have answers. I'm just trying to get through each day without the anger and hurt consuming me completely. Some days are better than others. That story is absolutely devastating. 20 years of friendship destroyed over money. And the complete lack of remorse, the entitlement, that's what really gets me. She convinced herself that stealing was justified because she decided she needed the money more. That's not how the world works. Let me share another story that deals with family relationships and the complicated dynamics that can develop over time. My mother-in-law secretly moved in with us while I was on a business trip and refuses to leave. I'm 34 years old, married for 6 years, and until about 2 months ago, I thought my husband and I had a pretty solid relationship. We disagreed sometimes, like any couple, but we always talked things through. Communication was our strength. At least, that's what I believed. My husband, who I'll call Derek, has always had a complicated relationship with his mother Helen. She's a widow. Her husband passed away about 8 years ago, and she lives alone in a small house about an hour away from us. Over the years, she's become increasingly dependent on Derek emotionally. She calls multiple times a day, gets upset if he doesn't visit at least once a week, and has never really accepted that he has his own life and family now. I've tried to be understanding. Losing a spouse is traumatic, and I can see why she might cling to her only child. But there have been boundary issues over the years. She showed up unannounced during our honeymoon. She calls during dinner every single night. She once rearranged our entire kitchen when she was visiting because she thought it was organized wrong. Still, I never expected what happened next. I had to go on a business trip for 10 days. It was an important conference in another city, and I couldn't miss it. Derek encouraged me to go, said he'd hold down the fort. No problem. Everything seemed fine. When I came home, Helen was living in our guest room. Not visiting, living, with suitcases unpacked, toiletries in the bathroom, her clothes in the closet. Derek admitted, somewhat sheepishly, that his mother had been having trouble keeping up with her house on her own. The stairs were getting difficult, the maintenance was overwhelming, and she'd been lonely. So he'd invited her to come stay with us for a while until they figured out a better solution. A while. Until they figured out a better solution. Without consulting me, without even mentioning it before he did it. I pulled him into our bedroom and asked how he could possibly have thought this was okay. He said he knew I'd have concerns, but he figured it would be easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. He said his mum was struggling and needed help, and as her only family, he had to step up. I pointed out that I was his family too, that we were supposed to make major decisions together. That inviting someone to live in our home, even temporarily, was the kind of thing that required both partners to agree. He got defensive, said I was being selfish, that his mother had nowhere else to go and I was making this about my comfort when it should be about helping someone in need. The worst part is that Helen didn't even seem apologetic. When I tried to talk to her about the situation, she said she assumed I knew and had agreed. She said Derek told her I was fine with it. Whether that was a lie he told her or a lie she was telling me, I don't know. It's been 2 months now. Helen is still here. She's taken over the kitchen, rearranged the living room furniture, and has opinions about everything from how I do laundry to what we have for dinner. Derek keeps saying they're looking for assisted living options, or maybe a smaller apartment closer to us, but nothing ever materializes. I've thought about leaving, going to stay with my sister until Derek figures out what he wants more, his marriage or his mother living in our house. But leaving feels like abandoning my own home, like giving up territory I shouldn't have to give up. We've been to couples counselling twice. The therapist validated my feelings, said Derek should have discussed this with me before acting unilaterally. Derek agreed in the session but hasn't actually done anything to change the situation. His mother is still here, still rearranging my kitchen. I love my husband. I married him knowing his mother was difficult, but I didn't marry Helen. I didn't agree to share my home with someone who fundamentally doesn't respect me or my space. And Derek's refusal to see that as a problem makes me wonder if he ever really saw me as an equal partner in our marriage at all. That situation sounds absolutely exhausting. Having someone move into your home without your consent and then being told you're selfish for having a problem with it. The lack of respect there is stunning. And it's not just Helen who's the problem. It's Derek's willingness to prioritize his mother over his marriage. Let's move to a different kind of story now. This one involves a revelation that changed how someone saw their entire past. I found out my parents adopted me to replace the child they lost, and they still celebrate her birthday, not mine. I'm 27 years old and was adopted as a baby. I always knew I was adopted. My parents told me from an early age and made sure I understood that being adopted didn't make me any less their child. Or so I thought. What I didn't know until recently was why they adopted me. And the answer has fundamentally changed how I see my entire childhood. My parents had a biological daughter before me. Her name was Emma, and she died from a childhood illness when she was 2 years old. They were devastated, as any parents would be. A year after Emma's death, they adopted me. I found out about Emma accidentally. I was helping my mum go through boxes in the attic, looking for old photos for a family reunion slideshow, when I came across a box I'd never seen before. Inside were baby pictures, but not of me, a blonde baby, different from my dark hair, clothes and toys I didn't recognize, and a small urn. My mum found me standing there, staring at everything, and finally told me the truth, about Emma, about her illness and death, about how they'd adopted me because they wanted to be parents again and thought a new baby might help them heal. What she told me next is what really broke me. She said that in some ways I had saved them, that having me gave them a reason to keep going after losing Emma, that she saw me as a gift that helped fill the hole Emma left, a gift that helped fill the hole, not a complete person in my own right, a replacement, a bandage for their grief. When I started processing this information, other things from my childhood started making sense in a horrible new way. Like how my birthday never seemed to be a big deal in our house, but there was always a day in March where my parents would be sad and distant, where we'd go to a cemetery I never understood we were visiting, where they'd be gentle and withdrawn. That day in March was Emma's birthday. Emma, who would have been 29 now if she'd lived. Emma, whose photos I found carefully preserved while most of my childhood pictures were shoved in random albums. Emma, who got an urn in a special box while I got the leftover space in their hearts. I've struggled with this for months now. I don't blame my parents for grieving their lost child. I don't blame them for wanting to be parents again. But I feel like my entire existence has been defined by someone else's absence. Like I was never really me to them. I was always Emma's replacement. When I tried to talk to them about this, my mum cried and said I was being unfair. She said they love me completely, that I'm their daughter in every way. But then, why didn't they ever tell me about Emma? Why did they hide her existence for 27 years? Why do they still mourn her birthday while barely acknowledging mine? I've been in therapy trying to work through all of this. My therapist helps me see that I can hold multiple truths at once. My parents can love me genuinely and also have been using me to cope with their grief. Their love can be real and also complicated by trauma they never properly processed. But knowing that intellectually doesn't make it hurt less. I still feel like a substitute, like I've spent my whole life auditioning for a role that was cast before I was born, like no matter what I do or who I become, I'll never be the child they really wanted. If anyone else out there has experienced something similar, I want you to know that your feelings are valid. Being adopted is not inherently traumatic, and most adoptees have perfectly normal, healthy relationships with their families. But when adoption is tangled up with unresolved grief, when a child is expected to heal wounds they didn't cause, that's when things get complicated. You are not a replacement for anyone. You are a complete person with your own value and your own place in the world, even if the people who raised you struggle to see that sometimes. That story cuts deep. The weight of being seen as a replacement rather than an individual, that's something that would shape a person's entire sense of self. And the parents hiding Emma's existence for all those years just adds another layer of betrayal to an already complicated situation. Let me share another story now. This one is about workplace dynamics and how one person's actions can completely derail someone else's career. My co-worker sabotaged my promotion and then got promoted herself using my ideas. I'm 31 years old and worked in the marketing department of a medium-sized company. I'd been there for 5 years, worked my way up from an entry-level position, and was finally being considered for a senior manager role. It was everything I'd been working toward. There was another candidate for the position, a woman I'll call Kristen. Kristen and I had been friendly, or so I thought. We weren't best friends, but we'd have lunch together sometimes, collaborate on projects, celebrate each other's wins. I thought we had a healthy professional relationship. The senior manager position required us each to present a project proposal to the executive team. It was essentially a competition to see who had the better vision for the department's future. I worked on my proposal for weeks, staying late, coming in on weekends, perfecting every detail. A few days before the presentations, Kristen asked to see my proposal. She said she wanted to give me feedback, help each other improve. I was hesitant at first, but she made a good point about how friendly competition was still friendly, so I shared my deck with her. On presentation day, Kristen went first, and as she clicked through her slides, my stomach dropped further and further. She was presenting my ideas, not just similar concepts, but my exact strategies, my specific recommendations, even phrases I'd written. She'd changed some graphics and reordered things slightly, but the substance was mine. When it was my turn, I presented my original proposal, but the executives looked confused. They said a lot of this seemed to overlap with what Kristen had just shown them. I tried to explain that she'd seen my work beforehand, that she must have copied it, but without proof, it just looked like I was making excuses. Kristen got the promotion. Afterward, I went to HR with my concerns. I showed them the original files on my computer with timestamps proving I'd created them before our conversation. But Kristen claimed she'd been working on similar ideas independently and that any overlap was coincidental. She said I was a sore loser trying to undermine her success. HR conducted what they called an investigation, which consisted of talking to both of us and deciding there wasn't enough evidence to prove anything either way. Kristen kept her promotion. I was told to move on. I couldn't move on. Going to work every day and reporting to someone who'd stolen from me was unbearable. She'd comment on my work, give me assignments, act like nothing had happened. The injustice of it was suffocating. I started looking for another job and found one about 3 months later at a competitor. Better title, better pay. But I had to start over in terms of relationships and reputation. 5 years of work at my old company, and I left with nothing to show for it except a reference from a manager who'd been fooled by a thief. The worst part is that Kristen is still thriving. I check in sometimes through LinkedIn, and she's always posting about her latest achievements, her wonderful team, her exciting projects built on a foundation of stolen ideas. I've thought a lot about whether I should have done more to fight back, gone above HR, hired a lawyer, made a bigger stink. But at some point, I realized that fighting would consume me more than the actual wrong had. Sometimes, The best thing you can do is walk away and build something better elsewhere. Still, if I could go back, I never would have shared that proposal with her. Trust has to be earned, and I gave it away too freely. That story is a perfect example of how professional betrayal can completely upend someone's life. Working for years toward a goal, only to have it snatched away by someone who took a shortcut through theft. The lack of consequences for Kristen is infuriating, but unfortunately realistic. A lot of workplace wrongdoing goes unpunished because it's hard to prove. Let's move to another story about family expectations and the pressure they can put on people. My family expected me to give up my career to care for my aging parents while my brother does nothing. I'm 33 years old and female. My brother is 36 and male. Those demographics matter for this story, unfortunately. My parents are both in their late 60s and have started having health problems. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but the kind of issues that require more care and attention. Doctor's appointments, help around the house, someone to check in regularly. They still live in the same house where we grew up, about an hour from where I live. When the topic of their care came up at a family dinner, everyone immediately looked at me. Not my brother, who lives even closer to them than I do, not a discussion of hiring professional help, just me, as if it was obvious that I would be the one to step up. When I asked why I was the default option, my mum said it was because I was the daughter. She said daughters naturally take care of their parents, while sons have their own families to worry about. My brother nodded along, like this made perfect sense. For context, my brother is married with 2 kids. I'm single and childless. In my family's eyes, this apparently means I have nothing better to do than become a full-time caregiver. Never mind that I have a career I've worked hard to build. Never mind that being single doesn't mean my time is less valuable. Never mind that my brother makes twice what I do and could easily afford to contribute to professional care. I pushed back, and things got ugly. My mum cried and said she couldn't believe I'd abandon her when she needed me most. My dad said he was disappointed in how selfish I'd become. My brother said he would help out when he could, but I shouldn't expect too much because he has responsibilities. I asked what responsibilities I have that are less important than his. He said his kids need him. I said my career needs me. He said careers don't matter as much as family. I said that was easy to say when he wasn't the one being asked to sacrifice. We haven't spoken much since that dinner. I've made it clear that I'm willing to help, but not to be the sole caregiver. I'll contribute financially. I'll visit regularly. I'll help research and coordinate professional care options. But I won't quit my job and move back home to be their live-in nurse while my brother continues his life unchanged. The fallout has been significant. Extended family members have called to lecture me about my duty as a daughter. My mom sends guilt-tripping texts about how she sacrificed so much to raise me, and this is how I repay her. My dad mostly just gives me the silent treatment when I do come to visit. What hurts most is the double standard. If I were a son, no one would expect me to give up everything to care for my parents. But because I'm a woman, and especially because I'm a woman without children, my life is seen as expendable. Like my job is just something I do to pass the time until a real purpose comes along. I've started setting firmer boundaries and accepting that not everyone in my family will like me for it. Some relationships might be permanently damaged. But I can't set myself on fire to keep others warm. That's not sustainable for anyone. If you're dealing with similar pressure, I want you to know that you're not selfish for wanting to live your own life. Caring for aging parents is a family responsibility that should be shared equitably, not dumped on one person because of their gender or relationship status. You have value beyond what you can provide to others. That story touches on such a common but rarely discussed issue. The gendered expectations around caregiving, the assumption that women's careers are less important, the guilt-tripping when boundaries are set. It's exhausting just reading about it, let alone living through it. Our next story goes into different territory. This one's about romantic relationships and the moment when you realize someone isn't who you thought they were. My boyfriend of 3 years proposed at my sister's wedding reception. At first, it sounds romantic, right? Getting engaged at a wedding? People do it sometimes, but let me give you the full context. My sister and I have a complicated relationship. We're not close, partly because we're very different people, and partly because there's always been competition between us. She's the pretty one, I'm the smart one. She got more attention from our parents growing up. I got better grades, the usual sibling rivalry stuff, but it's left some lingering tension. When my sister got engaged 2 years ago, I was happy for her, but also, honestly, a little jealous. My boyfriend, who I'll call Tyler, and I had been together for over a year at that point, and I was wondering when our time would come. I tried not to let that jealousy affect our relationship, but Tyler knew I was sensitive about the topic. Fast forward to my sister's wedding day. Beautiful ceremony, gorgeous venue, everything a bride could want. At the reception, people were dancing and having a great time. And then Tyler did it. He got down on one knee in the middle of the dance floor, pulled out a ring, and asked me to marry him. In front of my sister, at her wedding, during her reception, for about 5 seconds, I was thrilled. Then I saw my sister's face, and my mum's face, and the faces of everyone who had come to celebrate my sister's marriage, not to witness my engagement. The room went quiet. Some people clapped nervously. Tyler was beaming, waiting for my answer, completely oblivious to what he'd done. I said yes, because I didn't know what else to do in the moment, but inside I was dying. I could feel my sister's eyes on me, could see her perfect day being overshadowed by my boyfriend's complete lack of awareness. Afterward, my sister refused to speak to me. She said I must have known this was going to happen, that Tyler and I had planned it together to upstage her. I swore I had no idea, and that was true. Tyler had never mentioned anything to me about proposing that night. When I confronted Tyler about it later, he didn't understand why I was upset. He said he thought it would be romantic, that weddings are about love, and what better time to celebrate our love than surrounded by family already dressed up for the occasion. He genuinely thought he'd done something sweet. That's when I started to see him differently. Not just this incident, but a pattern. Tyler always had these ideas that seemed romantic to him, but actually centered his needs and desires over everyone else's. Planning surprise trips without asking if I could take time off work, inviting his friends to my birthday dinner without asking, making major decisions and then presenting them to me as done deals I should be grateful for. The proposal at my sister's wedding wasn't an isolated incident. It was just the most egregious example of Tyler's inability to consider how his actions affected others. I gave the ring back a month later. The breakup was messy because Tyler genuinely didn't understand what he'd done wrong. He accused me of being ungrateful, of listening to my sister's complaints over his feelings, of not appreciating romantic gestures. My sister and I have actually gotten closer since then, bonded by mutual frustration at Tyler's obliviousness. She forgave me once she understood I really had no idea he was going to do that. It took time, but our relationship is probably better now than it was before. As for Tyler, last I heard, he proposed to his next girlfriend at a restaurant on someone else's anniversary dinner. Some people never learn. That story is a perfect example of how some people think they're being romantic when they're actually being self-centered. Proposing at someone else's wedding without the couple's blessing is widely considered one of the tackiest moves you can make. The fact that Tyler couldn't see that, even when confronted, shows a fundamental lack of empathy. Let me share another story now. This one deals with secrets in marriage and the devastating moment when they come to light. I found journals in our attic that revealed my wife had been keeping a record of every mistake I've made for 15 years. I'm 47 years old and have been married for 18 years. We have 2 teenage kids together. I always thought our marriage was good. Not perfect, but solid. We argued sometimes, but always made up. We supported each other's careers, raised our kids together, built a life. Or so I thought. Last month, I was cleaning out the attic and found a box I didn't recognize. Inside were about a dozen journals, all in my wife's handwriting. I figured they were old diaries, maybe from before we met, and I was curious. I know I probably shouldn't have read them, but I did. What I found wasn't romantic, reminiscing about our early relationship. It was a detailed catalogue of my failures, every argument we'd ever had, written from her perspective with me as the villain. Every mistake I'd made, documented with dates and specifics. Every time I'd forgotten something, said the wrong thing, fallen short of her expectations, all of it recorded like evidence for a trial. The earliest entries were from the first year of our marriage. The most recent was from a month ago, 18 years of my wife keeping score of my shortcomings. Some entries were about big things. arguments about money or parenting decisions, but most were about small, petty things I didn't even remember. Not complimenting dinner enough in 2012, being 5 minutes late to pick up the kids in 2014, making a joke at a party in 2018 that she found embarrassing. Reading through them was like watching my marriage through a funhouse mirror. Every event I remembered as minor was catastrophic in her telling. Every time I thought we'd resolved something, she'd secretly held on to it, adding it to her collection of grievances. When I confronted her, she was defensive at first, said the journals were private and I had no right to read them, which, fair enough. But then she said something that really stuck with me. She said keeping the journals helped her manage her frustration so she didn't take it out on me. Helped her manage. Like cataloguing my failures was some kind of therapy. Like keeping a running score of my mistakes was a healthy way to handle disagreements in a marriage. I asked her if there were journals about the good things I did, the times I supported her, the sacrifices I made, the moments we were happy. She said she didn't feel the need to write those down because she remembered them. But she didn't feel the need to remember my mistakes naturally. She had to write them down, preserve them, build an archive of resentment. We're in couples therapy now, trying to figure out if this marriage can be saved. The therapist says the journals represent a deep-seated pattern of negative thinking that my wife has been training herself to see me in the worst possible light for years. Undoing that kind of mental habit is going to take time, if it's even possible. I don't know where this is going to end. Some days I think we can work through it. Other days I think about all those journals, all those carefully documented grievances, and I wonder if she ever really loved me at all or if I've just been a source of material for her complaint collection this whole time. That story is honestly chilling. The idea of your partner secretly documenting every mistake you make for nearly 2 decades. That's not a relationship, that's building a case. The fact that she saw it as a healthy coping mechanism shows how disconnected her perspective had become from what healthy relationships actually look like. Let's move to a lighter story now, though it still involves conflict and the difficulty of navigating family dynamics. My husband's family holds an annual competition for the worst Christmas gift, and they've been targeting me for years. I married into what I thought was a quirky, fun-loving family. They had all these traditions I'd never encountered before, including something they called the White Elephant Exchange with a twist. In most White Elephant exchanges, you bring a funny or useless gift and everyone steals from each other. This family's version was different. The goal was to bring a gift specifically terrible for the person you were assigned. The worse the gift, the bigger the laugh. Points were awarded for creativity in awfulness. My first year participating, I thought it was hilarious. I was assigned my husband's uncle, and I got him a book about vegan cooking because he's famously carnivorous. Everyone laughed. He pretended to be horrified, and I thought I understood the game. Then I opened my gift. Someone had gotten me a weight loss journal with a note that said, "For your New Year's resolution, I'm a size 12. Not exactly overweight, but apparently overweight enough to be the target of a pointed joke." I tried to laugh it off. My husband said I was being too sensitive. It was just the game. Everyone gets terrible gifts. The next year, my gift was a book about how to be a better wife with specific pages bookmarked about keeping the house clean. My husband thought it was funny. I did not. The year after that, I received a framed photo of my husband with his ex-girlfriend from high school, inscribed with, "The one that got away." Every single year, my gifts have been specifically designed to hurt me. Not just generic bad gifts, but targeted attacks on my insecurities, my weight, my homemaking skills, my status as an outsider in their family. Meanwhile, the gifts I've given have been genuinely playful and in good spirit. I never try to actually wound anyone, but apparently that's not the game they're playing with me. Last year, I finally refused to participate. I told my husband that I would attend Christmas, but I wouldn't open a gift that was designed to humiliate me. He said I was overreacting, that everyone gets roasted equally, and that I needed to toughen up if I wanted to be part of the family. His mother pulled me aside and said she was disappointed, that the exchange was a beloved tradition and my refusal to participate was an insult to the family. She suggested that maybe I was too thin-skinned for their sense of humour. I asked her what gifts she'd received over the years. She listed things like joke books and silly hats and novelty socks, generic bad gifts, not weaponized insults about her body or her marriage. The double standard was clear, but no one in the family wanted to acknowledge it. I was the outsider, and this was apparently how outsiders got treated until they earned their place. How you earn your place by tolerating abuse, I'm not sure. My husband and I have had many arguments about this. He still thinks I'm overreacting. He says his family welcomes me, and this is just how they show affection. I say that affection shouldn't make you cry in the bathroom during a holiday dinner. This year, I'm spending Christmas with my own family. My husband can join me, or attend his family's tradition alone. Either way, I'm done subjecting myself to annual humiliation for the sake of family togetherness. That story shows how family traditions can sometimes be used as cover for bullying. When one person is consistently targeted more harshly than others, it stops being playful and starts being cruel. The husband's refusal to see the pattern is especially frustrating. As we near the end of tonight's stories, let me share one more that deals with the long-term consequences of choices made in youth. 20 years ago, I chose my career over my relationship, and now I wonder if I made the biggest mistake of my life. I'm 43 years old, successful by most external measures. Good job, nice apartment, financial stability. I've travelled the world, built a career I'm proud of, accomplished most of the goals I set for myself in my 20s. But I'm also alone. When I was 23, I was in love with someone I'll call Sarah. We'd been together for 2 years, and she was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Kind, funny, supportive, beautiful. We talked about the future constantly. Marriage, kids, growing old together. Then I got a job offer in another city. A dream opportunity, the kind of career-launching position that might never come around again, but it meant leaving Sarah behind. She had her own career, her own roots, and moving across the country wasn't something she could do. I agonized over the decision for weeks. Sarah said she'd support whatever I chose, but I could see in her eyes that she was hoping I'd choose her, that I'd choose us, that I'd prioritize our future over my career. I took the job. We tried long distance for about 6 months before it fell apart. The calls got shorter. The visits got less frequent. Eventually, she met someone else, someone who was actually present in her life. We ended things without much drama, just the sad acknowledgement that our paths had diverged too far to find our way back. For years, I told myself I'd made the right choice. My career flourished. I got promotions, raises, recognition. I dated other people, had relationships that lasted months or sometimes years. But nothing ever felt like what I had with Sarah. A few years ago, I looked her up on social media. She's married now, has 3 kids, lives in a house with a garden in the same city where we met. She looks happy, really, genuinely happy. And I wondered, what would my life look like if I'd made a different choice? If I'd stayed, would we have made it? Would I be the one in that house with her, watching our kids play in that garden? There's no way to know, of course. Maybe we would have broken up anyway. Maybe the resentment of giving up my career would have poisoned our relationship. Maybe we weren't meant to last no matter what. But sometimes, late at night, I think about the parallel universe where I chose differently, where I prioritized love over ambition, where I trusted that career opportunities would come again, but Sarah might not. In that universe, am I happier, more fulfilled, less lonely? The hardest part about this kind of regret is that there's nothing to be done about it. The choice was made 20 years ago. Sarah has moved on. I can't undo the past, can't go back and make a different decision. I can only live with the consequences of the choice I made. I'm not sharing this to say that choosing career is always the wrong decision. For some people, it's the right one. For some relationships, the distance would have been survivable. But for me, with Sarah, at that moment, I think I chose wrong. And I have to live with that. If you're facing a similar choice, I'd tell you this. Consider carefully what you value most. Jobs can be replaced, opportunities come again. But some people, some connections, are truly once in a lifetime. Don't let fear of the unknown or ambition blindness cost you something irreplaceable. That story captures a kind of quiet, lingering regret that many people carry. The wondering about roads not taken, the parallel lives we might have lived. There's no dramatic betrayal here, no villain to blame, just the melancholy of choices made and consequences accepted. Well, everyone, we've reached the end of tonight's stories. We've covered betrayal, family drama, workplace sabotage, relationship struggles, and the complicated nature of human connection. Some of these stories have happy endings, or at least hopeful ones. Others don't. That's how life works sometimes. I hope these stories gave you something to think about while you wind down for the night. Maybe they made you feel less alone in your own struggles. Maybe they helped you appreciate the relationships in your life that are working. Or maybe they just kept you company while the Minecraft blocks built and the world got quieter. Thank you for spending this time with me. If you enjoyed tonight's content, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next video. I read stories like this regularly, and your support means the world to me. Until next time, take care of yourselves, be kind to the people in your life, and remember that no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. There's a whole world of people out there dealing with their own complicated stories, just like these. Good night, everyone. Sleep well. But wait, before you drift off completely, let me share a few more stories that came in. These are a bit different from what we've covered so far, but they're just as compelling. My neighbour has been stealing packages from my porch for months, and when I finally caught her, she blamed me for ordering too many things. I work from home and do a lot of online shopping. Not excessive amounts, but probably more than the average person. Over the past year, I'd noticed packages going missing. Nothing huge at first, just small items here and there. I assumed it was delivery errors or porch pirates passing through. Then I installed a doorbell camera. The footage showed my neighbour, a woman in her 50s who I'd always had a cordial relationship with, walking up to my porch and taking boxes. Not once or twice, but regularly. Over the course of 2 months, I documented over a dozen thefts. When I confronted her with the video evidence, she didn't deny it. Instead, she said I was ordering so much stuff that I clearly didn't need all of it. She said she was just taking the things that seemed excessive. She called it redistributing resources. I asked her what gave her the right to decide what I needed and what was excessive. She said I was being materialistic and selfish, that good neighbours share with each other, and that I should be grateful she hadn't reported me to the HOA for having too many deliveries. I called the police. She was charged with theft. Our cordial neighbour relationship is obviously over. What amazes me most is her complete lack of remorse. Even when confronted with clear video evidence, she found a way to blame me for her actions, as if my online shopping habits justified her stealing from me. The entitlement some people have is truly astonishing. Deciding that someone else's property is up for grabs because you've judged them as having too much. That's not redistribution. That's theft with extra steps. Here's another one that came in recently about entitled behaviour. My sister expects me to babysit her kids every weekend for free because I don't have children of my own. I'm 32, happily child-free by choice. I have a career I love, hobbies that fulfill me, and a life that I've built according to my own priorities. I made an informed decision not to have children, and I'm at peace with it. My sister, on the other hand, has 3 kids under the age of 8. She loves being a mom, and I respect her choice just as I expect her to respect mine. Or at least, I used to think she respected mine. About a year ago, she started asking me to babysit on weekends. At first, it was occasional, maybe once a month, and I was happy to help. I love my nieces and nephew, and spending time with them can be fun in small doses. But the requests started increasing. Every weekend, then weekend afternoons and evenings, then entire Saturdays while she and her husband had date days or ran errands or just wanted a break. When I started saying no, she got upset. She said I had free time that I was wasting on hobbies when I could be helping family. She said since I didn't have kids of my own, the least I could do was help with hers. She actually said that my free time belonged to the family since I wasn't using it to raise children. I tried to explain that my choice not to have kids didn't mean I signed up to help raise hers, that my weekends were my own, filled with activities I'd chosen and a life I'd built. That being child-free didn't mean being available for unlimited free babysitting. She called me selfish, said I was failing as a sister and an aunt, said she couldn't believe how little I valued family. Our parents have sided with her, of course. They keep saying that family helps family, that I should be more giving, that it wouldn't kill me to sacrifice a few weekends. They don't seem to understand that a few weekends has turned into every weekend, and that my life has been hijacked by my sister's decision to have children. I've had to set firm boundaries that have damaged my relationship with my sister. We barely speak now outside of family events, but I refuse to apologize for having a life of my own, or for not wanting to spend every Saturday being an unpaid nanny. If you're dealing with similar pressure, know that your time is valuable regardless of whether you have children. Child-free doesn't mean obligation-free to everyone else's kids. You're allowed to have boundaries. That story resonates with a lot of people who've chosen not to have children. The assumption that child-free adults have unlimited free time that belongs to the family is so common and so frustrating. Everyone's time has value, regardless of how they've chosen to fill it. Let me share one more story about family expectations gone wrong. My parents announced at my graduation party that they were spending my college fund on my brother's wedding instead. I worked incredibly hard in high school. Straight A's, extracurricular activities, volunteer work, all with the goal of getting into a good college. My parents had always told me there was a college fund waiting for me, money they'd been setting aside since I was born. I got into my dream school with a partial scholarship. The scholarship covered about half my tuition, and my parents assured me the college fund would cover the rest. Everything was set. I was excited to start this new chapter of my life. Then came my graduation party. My parents had invited all our relatives, family, friends, the whole 9 yards. In the middle of the party, they gathered everyone for an announcement. I assumed they were going to toast my graduation or share how proud they were. Instead, they announced that my older brother was engaged and that they would be paying for an extravagant wedding. The wedding of his dreams, no expense spared. When I asked later how they were going to pay for both the wedding and my college, my dad looked at me like I was stupid. He said they couldn't afford both, so they'd made a choice. The wedding was a once-in-a-lifetime event that the whole family could enjoy. My college education was just something that benefited me, just me, as if my future didn't matter because it was mine alone, as if the education they'd promised me was less important than a party. My brother didn't object. He stood there, smiling, accepting congratulations while I tried to process that my college fund had just been redirected to his reception. 20-something years of savings, gone in an announcement I didn't even know was coming. I ended up taking out significant student loans to attend college, loans I'm still paying off 10 years later. Meanwhile, my brother's wedding was apparently spectacular. I wouldn't know. I didn't attend. Our relationship, both with my brother and my parents, has never recovered. They say I'm holding a grudge over a decision they had the right to make. I say they broke a promise that shaped my entire childhood, that motivated every late night studying, every activity I joined to build my application. The worst part is that they still don't see what they did wrong. Every time the subject comes up, they defend their choice, say the wedding was beautiful, say my brother's marriage is thriving, say I should have found a way to make it work without their help if I really wanted it badly enough. I did make it work, but the cost, financial and emotional, was something I'll carry for the rest of my life. That story is just heartbreaking. The betrayal of having something promised to you your entire life, something you planned around and worked toward, taken away for someone else's party. And the complete lack of recognition that they did anything wrong. Some parents really do play favourites, and the favoured child often doesn't even see it happening. All right, everyone. Now I really am wrapping up for tonight. These stories have taken us through the full spectrum of human behaviour, from devastating betrayals to petty conflicts to deep-seated family dysfunction. What I hope you take away from all of this is that you're not alone in whatever you're dealing with. Someone else has faced something similar. Someone else has felt what you're feeling, and many of them have come out the other side. Life is messy. People disappoint us. Trust gets broken, but we keep going. We set boundaries. We find our people. We build new lives from the wreckage of old ones. That's what these stories really show. Not just the pain of betrayal, but the resilience of people who refuse to let that pain define them. Thank you again for spending this time with me. The Minecraft is still playing. The night is still quiet, and I hope you're feeling more peaceful than when we started. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment if any of these stories resonated with you, and most importantly, take care of yourself. You deserve it. Good night, everyone. Sweet dreams. Actually, you know what? I have a few more. These came in from people who wanted their stories shared, and I think they're worth including before we really call it a night. I secretly paid off my parents' mortgage because they always told me I'd never amount to anything. Growing up, I was the family screw-up. My older sister was the golden child, straight A's, perfect behaviour, everything my parents wanted. I struggled in school, got in trouble sometimes, didn't fit the mould they wanted me to fit. The message I got, constantly, was that I'd never amount to anything. That my sister would be successful while I'd be lucky to keep a minimum wage job. That I was a disappointment and should try to be more like her. It hurt at the time, but it also lit a fire in me. I was determined to prove them wrong. I worked my way through community college, then transferred to a 4-year university. I got a business degree and started a small company that, against all odds, actually succeeded. 10 years later, I'm doing well. Really well. Not billionaire rich, but comfortable enough that I don't worry about money anymore. My sister, meanwhile, is fine, but not exceptional. Good job, average salary, nothing to complain about, but nothing remarkable either. A few years ago, I secretly paid off my parents' mortgage. Didn't tell them it was me. Just made the payments anonymously through my lawyer until the house was free and clear. They were baffled, thought it was some kind of bank error or government program they'd accidentally qualified for. I've never told them it was me. Part of me wants to see their faces when they realise that the screw-up son they wrote off is the one who gave them their home free and clear. But another part of me doesn't need their validation anymore. I did it for myself, to prove to the kid I used to be that he was worth something, that he could do something remarkable even if his parents couldn't see it. Maybe someday I'll tell them, or maybe I'll take the secret to my grave. Either way, I know the truth. I know what I accomplished despite everything they said, and that's enough. That story takes a different turn than most of the ones we've covered tonight. Instead of revenge or confrontation, this person channeled their hurt into success and then used that success to quietly help the very people who hurt them. There's something beautiful about that, even if it's tinged with sadness. Here's another story that came from someone dealing with a very different kind of family situation. My grandmother left me her house in her will, and now my entire family hates me. I was always close to my grandmother. When I was young and my parents were going through a messy divorce, she took me in for a summer. That summer turned into most of my childhood. I lived with her more than with either of my parents. She wasn't rich, but she had a small house that she'd owned for decades. It was my home for years, filled with memories of her teaching me to cook, helping me with homework, being the stable presence I needed when everything else was chaos. When she passed away last year, I expected the house to go to my parents or be split among the grandchildren. There are 5 of us, and I figured we'd each get a small portion of whatever she had. Instead, she left the house entirely to me. Her will explained why. She said I was the only one who'd really been there for her in her final years. The only grandchild who visited regularly, called weekly, helped her with errands and appointments. She said the house should go to someone who valued it as a home, not just as an asset. My parents and cousins lost their minds. They accused me of manipulating her, of turning her against them, of being a gold digger who only helped her for the inheritance. None of that was true. I helped her because I loved her. The inheritance was a surprise to me too. They've hired a lawyer to contest the will. They say she wasn't of sound mind when she wrote it, that I must have exerted undue influence, that it's not fair for one grandchild to get everything while the others get nothing. The thing is, they're right that it's not fair. But life isn't fair, and my grandmother had the right to leave her property to whoever she wanted. The fact that she chose me isn't my fault. It's the consequence of me being present when no one else bothered. The legal battle is ongoing. I don't know how it will end. But regardless of the outcome, my relationship with my family is destroyed. They see me as a thief who stole what should have been shared. I see them as vultures who only cared about my grandmother's assets, never about her. If there's a lesson here, it's that money tears families apart, even small amounts, even when the deceased person's wishes are clear. The promise of inheritance brings out the worst in people. That story is sadly common. Inheritance disputes destroy more families than almost anything else. And the irony is that the people who complain the loudest about unfairness are often the ones who did the least for the person who died. One more story before we really wrap up for the night. I found out my husband has been rating my cooking on a spreadsheet for our entire marriage. We've been married for 11 years. I always thought he appreciated my cooking. He'd compliment meals, ask for seconds, never complained. I felt confident in the kitchen because of his positive feedback. Then I borrowed his laptop to look something up and found the spreadsheet. Every meal I'd made for the past 11 years was logged. Date, dish, and a rating from 1 to 10. Some meals got 7s or 8s, many got 5s and 6s, a few got 1s and 2s. The comments were worse than the numbers. Things like oversalted as usual, and still hasn't figured out how to cook rice properly, and would rather eat fast food. All the while, he'd been smiling at me across the dinner table, telling me everything was delicious. When I confronted him, he said the spreadsheet was just for him, a way to track what he really thought so he could suggest improvements eventually. He said he didn't want to hurt my feelings, so he kept his criticism private. Private? He'd been lying to my face for 11 years. Every compliment was a lie. Every time he said a meal was great, he went back to his computer and wrote about how disappointing it actually was. I asked him why he never just told me if something wasn't good. He said he didn't want to make me feel bad. But finding this spreadsheet made me feel way worse than occasional honest feedback would have. Our marriage is struggling now, not just because of the spreadsheet, but because of what it represents. If he was dishonest about something as minor as dinner, what else has he been lying about? What else has he been privately documenting while smiling to my face? I don't know if we'll make it through this. Trust is fundamental to a marriage, and I've just discovered that I can't trust anything he says. Everything is suspect now. That story is so bizarre, yet somehow relatable. The idea of discovering that someone's been secretly critical of you while pretending to be supportive is deeply unsettling, and you're right to wonder what else might be documented in hidden spreadsheets. Okay, everyone, that's really it for tonight. We've gone through stories of betrayal, family drama, relationship struggles, workplace conflicts, and the general chaos of human connection. It's been a journey. I hope these stories gave you something to think about, or at least kept you company while the night got quieter. Remember, no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. Someone else has been there. Someone else has survived it, and so will you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this community. Subscribe if you want more content like this. Leave a comment with your own stories if you feel comfortable sharing, and most importantly, be kind to yourselves and to each other. Good night, everyone. May your dreams be peaceful and your tomorrow be better than today. See you next time. Wait, I know I keep saying it's the end, but these stories keep coming in, and some of them are too good not to share. So if you're still awake, settle back in. Let's keep going a little longer. My roommate sold my furniture while I was visiting my parents for the holidays. I had lived with this person for about 1.5 years. We weren't best friends, but we got along. Paid bills on time, respected each other's space, had a functioning adult living arrangement. Or so I thought. Over winter break, I went to visit my parents for 2 weeks. It was a planned trip. My roommate knew about it in advance, even helped me water my plants while I was gone. When I came back, half my furniture was missing. My couch, my coffee table, my bedroom dresser, just gone. When I confronted my roommate, she acted like I was overreacting. She said her sister needed furniture for her new apartment and couldn't afford to buy any, so she gave her mine. Not lent, gave. I asked how she could possibly think that was okay. She said I had so much stuff that I wouldn't notice a few pieces missing. She said I should be happy to help family. Her family, not mine. Her sister, whom I'd never met. I told her she needed to get my furniture back immediately or replace it with equivalent items. She said I was being materialistic and that furniture is just stuff. She said real adults don't get this upset over things. Real adults also don't sell or give away other people's property without permission. That's theft. I threatened to call the police, and she finally caved. She called her sister and got some of the furniture back, though it was damaged from being moved twice. The dresser had a broken drawer, The couch had a new stain. The coffee table was missing entirely because her sister had already sold it. She never apologized. She actually expected me to thank her for getting some of my stuff back, like she was doing me a favor by retrieving my own property that she'd stolen. I moved out 2 months later, found a new apartment, new roommate, new start. But that experience taught me that you can never fully trust someone you live with unless you really know them. Surface level politeness doesn't mean someone respects your boundaries or your belongings. If you have a roommate, even one you think you know well, be careful. Document your belongings. Keep valuables locked away. And never assume that just because someone hasn't wronged you yet, they won't. That level of entitlement is staggering. Just deciding that someone else's furniture belongs to your family now because they happen to need it. The mental gymnastics required to justify that are Olympic level. Let me share another story about living situations gone wrong. My landlord installed cameras in my apartment without telling me, and when I found out, he said I was being dramatic. I rented a small apartment in a building owned by an older man who lived in the unit below mine. He seemed nice at first, responsive to maintenance requests, friendly when we crossed paths. After about 6 months, I started noticing some strange things. My landlord would mention details about my day that I hadn't told him, like asking how my friend's visit went when I hadn't mentioned anyone was coming over, or commenting on a new piece of furniture when I hadn't had a conversation with him. I initially chalked it up to coincidence or thin walls, but then he said something that made my blood run cold. He mentioned a phone call I'd had with my mother, specifically referencing something she'd said about my father's health. There was no way he could have overheard that call. I was in my bedroom with the door closed, speaking quietly. The only way he could have known was if he was listening. I tore my apartment apart looking for bugs, and I found them. Small cameras disguised as smoke detectors, one in my living room and one in my bedroom. They were connected to a wireless network I didn't have access to. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He said the cameras were for security purposes, that as the building owner, he had a right to monitor his property. He said I was being dramatic and paranoid, that he wasn't watching anything inappropriate, just keeping an eye on things. Just keeping an eye on things. On me, in my bedroom, without my knowledge or consent. I called the police immediately. Turns out what he did was very illegal. He's been charged with invasion of privacy and some other things I don't fully understand the legal terms for. I moved out that same week, stayed with friends until I could find a new place. The violation I felt, knowing someone had been watching me in my most private moments, is something I'm still working through in therapy. If you rent from an individual landlord rather than a company, be vigilant. Check for hidden cameras when you move in, and periodically afterward. Pay attention if they seem to know things they shouldn't. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. That story is genuinely terrifying. The violation of having someone watch you in your own home without your knowledge is something that would mess with anyone's sense of safety and privacy. Here's another one that takes us back into family territory. My mother rewrote my wedding vows without asking and read them at my ceremony instead of my actual vows. My mother has always been controlling. Growing up, she picked my clothes, my friends, my extracurricular activities. When I left for college, I thought I'd finally have some independence, but she still tried to manage my life from a distance. When I got engaged, she was thrilled, not because she liked my fiancé, but because a wedding meant events she could plan and control. She insisted on being involved in every decision, from the venue to the flowers to the food. I tried to set boundaries. This was my wedding, not hers. But every boundary I set, she found a way around. If I said no to something, she'd go directly to my fiancé or the vendors. She was relentless. The vows were supposed to be sacred. My fiancé and I wrote our own, pouring our hearts into promises we would make to each other. We didn't share them with anyone beforehand. They were meant to be a surprise, even to each other. On the wedding day, when it came time for the vows, the officiant handed me a piece of paper. Not the paper I'd given him with my carefully written promises. A different paper, with different words, in my mother's handwriting. I was so shocked that I froze. The officiant was waiting. Everyone was watching. I looked at my mother, who was smiling proudly from the front row. I read her vows. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know what else to do in the moment. My actual vows were in my purse at the reception venue. I hadn't memorized them word for word. And I couldn't exactly explain to hundreds of guests that my mother had hijacked my wedding. The vows she'd written weren't terrible, objectively speaking. They were traditional, generic, the kind of vows you'd see in a movie. But they weren't mine. They weren't the promises I wanted to make. They didn't reflect my relationship or my love. When I confronted her afterward, she said I should be thanking her. She said my original vows were too informal and would have embarrassed the family. She said she improved them, by replacing my authentic words with her generic ones, by taking control of one of the most personal moments of my wedding. That was the beginning of the end of our relationship. I've had to go very low contact with her since then. She still doesn't understand what she did wrong. In her mind, she was helping. She was making things better. She was being a good mother. But good mothers don't steal their children's voices. They don't replace authenticity with conformity. They don't make their child's wedding about themselves. If you have a controlling parent, protect your important moments from them. Don't assume they'll respect boundaries just because the event is significant. People like this don't see boundaries. They only see opportunities to impose their will. That story is such a perfect example of how controlling parents can ruin special moments. Taking someone's personal vows and replacing them with your own words is such an invasive act. The fact that she still doesn't see anything wrong with it makes it even worse. Let me share a story about friendship and the moment when you realize it was never as mutual as you thought. I realize my best friend only calls me when she needs something, and I confronted her about it. For about 8 years, I considered someone my best friend. We'll call her Amy. Amy and I met in college and stayed close afterward. I thought we had a genuine connection, but as the years went on, I started noticing a pattern. Amy would call me when she needed help with something. Moving apartments, venting about her boyfriend, advice on work problems, and I was always there, happy to help. That's what friends do. The problem was that Amy was never there for me. When I went through a difficult breakup, Amy was too busy to meet up for coffee. When I lost my job, she sent a quick text but never followed up. When my father got sick, she said she was sorry but didn't ask about him again. Every time I reached out just to hang out, no crisis involved, she was unavailable. But when she needed something, suddenly her schedule opened right up. I finally confronted her about it after she called asking me to help her plan a party. I said I'd noticed that she only seemed to have time for me when she needed something. She got defensive immediately, said I was keeping score and that friendship wasn't supposed to be transactional. I pointed out that friendship goes both ways, that I'd been there for every crisis she'd had for years, and she couldn't even ask about my father when he was in the hospital. She said I was being unfair, that she had a lot going on, that I couldn't expect her to drop everything for my problems when she had her own life to deal with. That's when I realized we had very different definitions of friendship. To me, friendship means being there for each other, in good times and bad. To her, friendship meant having someone to call when she needed something. I stopped reaching out after that conversation. And guess what? Neither did she. It's been almost a year now, and we haven't spoken. She hasn't called to check in, to apologize, or to reconnect, because she doesn't need anything from me right now. It hurts, losing someone you thought was your best friend, but it also hurts less than constantly giving to someone who never gives back. If you're in a one-sided friendship, it's okay to walk away. Your energy and emotional labor have value. You deserve friends who reciprocate, not just take. That story is so relatable to anyone who's ever realized a friendship wasn't what they thought it was. The moment when the pattern becomes clear and you can't unsee it. Some people really do only keep friends around for what they can get from them. Here's another story about realizations and the pain they bring. I found my husband's journal where he wrote about wishing he'd married someone else. My husband and I have been together for 15 years, married for 12. We have 2 kids, a house, a whole life together. I thought we were happy, maybe not passionately in love like we were at the beginning, but contentedly happy. Then I found his journal. I wasn't snooping. It was just sitting on his nightstand, and I thought it was a notebook for work stuff. I opened it to see if it was mine that had gone missing. It wasn't. What I found instead were pages and pages about his regrets, about wondering what his life would have been like if he'd married his college girlfriend instead, about feeling trapped in a life he never really wanted, about going through the motions because leaving would be too complicated. There was an entry about our anniversary dinner from last year. I thought it had been a wonderful night. He wrote about counting the minutes until it was over. There were entries about our kids. Not all negative. He loves them. That was clear. But there were also passages about how having children had closed doors he wished were still open. And there were entries about me. About how I'd let myself go. About how he found me boring. About how he sometimes fantasized about what life would be like without me. I didn't confront him right away. I needed time to process. How do you absorb the knowledge that your entire marriage has been a facade? That the person you sleep next to every night sees you as a burden rather than a partner? When I finally brought it up, he was angry. Angry that I'd read his private thoughts. He said the journal was his outlet, a place to process feelings he couldn't express elsewhere. He said it didn't mean he didn't love me, just that he sometimes had complicated emotions. I asked if what he wrote was true, if he really wished he'd married someone else. He couldn't look me in the eye when he answered. We're in counselling now. He's apologised for writing hurtful things, though not for feeling them. He says he wants to make our marriage work. But how do you rebuild a relationship when you know your partner's honest internal monologue is full of regret about being with you? I don't know how this ends. Maybe we'll work through it. Maybe we won't. But nothing will ever be the same. You can't unread something like that. That story is absolutely heartbreaking. Discovering that your partner's private thoughts about you are so different from what they show you publicly. The disconnect between the marriage you thought you had and the one he was experiencing inside his head, that kind of revelation changes everything. We're really getting toward the end now. Let me share just a couple more that I think will resonate. My sister took credit for the surprise party I planned for our mother's 70th birthday. I spent 3 months planning my mother's surprise birthday party, coordinating with relatives across the country, booking the venue, ordering the cake, creating a photo slideshow of her life, all of it. My sister's contribution was showing up. On the night of the party, after my mother was surprised and everyone was celebrating, my aunt asked who had organised everything. Before I could answer, my sister said she did. Not we, not us together, just her. I thought she was joking and would correct herself. She didn't. She accepted compliments all night for the beautiful party she'd planned. She showed people the decorations she'd chosen, the menu she'd selected, the guest list she'd compiled. Everything she claimed credit for was something I had done. I pulled her aside and asked what she was doing. She said she'd help me with the party, so it was basically a team effort. I asked what exactly she'd helped with. She said she'd given me emotional support and encouragement. Emotional support, that was her contribution, texting occasionally to say the party sounded fun. When I tried to correct the record with family members, my sister got upset. She said I was trying to make her look bad, that I was being petty about getting credit, that the important thing was that Mum had a great party, not who got recognition for planning it. She's right that Mum's happiness is the important thing. But that doesn't mean I should stand by while someone takes credit for my work, especially my own sister. Our relationship has been strained since then. She still doesn't see what she did wrong. In her mind, we're equals because she showed up. Never mind the months of effort that went into making sure there was something to show up to. If you're dealing with a credit stealer, document your contributions. Make sure others know what you've done. Don't let someone else's opportunism erase your hard work. The audacity of taking credit for something you didn't do and then getting upset when you're called out for it. Some people really have no sense of shame. One final story for tonight, and then I promise we're done. I saved for 5 years to buy my dream car, and my parents gave it to my brother as a graduation gift. My whole life, I've wanted a specific car. A classic model that's not even that expensive, but was always just out of reach. I started saving when I was 19. Putting away a little bit from every paycheck, skipping luxuries, doing whatever I could to get closer to my goal. By the time I was 24, I had almost enough. I was months away from being able to buy it. I told my parents about my progress, excited to share how close I was. A few weeks later, my younger brother graduated from college. My parents threw him a big party, which I attended happily. I was proud of him for getting through school. Then they brought out his graduation gift. A car. The exact car I'd been saving for. They'd bought it for him because they knew how much I loved that model and figured he'd appreciate one too. They were so proud of themselves for getting him such a thoughtful gift. I stood there, watching my brother exclaim over the car I'd been working toward for half a decade, the car my parents had just given him for free. He didn't even particularly want it. He'd never mentioned liking that model, but they knew I did, so they assumed he would too. When I tried to explain how this felt, my parents said I was being jealous, that I should be happy for my brother, that I could still buy my own car. So what was the problem? The problem was that they took something I'd worked hard for and given it to someone else as a gift. The problem was that they didn't value my effort enough to consider how their choice would affect me. The problem was that once again, my brother got things handed to him while I had to earn everything myself. I eventually did buy my dream car about a year later, but every time I look at it, I'm reminded of that moment, of standing at that party, watching my goal being handed to someone who hadn't worked for it at all. Parents who don't see the favoritism in their actions are the hardest to deal with. They genuinely don't understand why treating their children differently might be harmful. In their minds, they love both kids equally, so everything is fine. That story perfectly captures the frustration of being the child who has to work for things while watching siblings get things handed to them. The obliviousness of the parents makes it even worse. All right, everyone, that's truly it for tonight. We've been through so many stories, so many examples of human behavior at its worst and occasionally its best. The common thread through all of them is that people are complicated, relationships are hard, and trust is precious. Thank you for spending this long evening with me. Whether you listened to the whole thing or drifted off somewhere in the middle, I appreciate you being here. If any of these stories resonated with you, or if you have your own stories you'd like to share, leave a comment below. This community is built on sharing experiences and supporting each other through the difficult parts of life. Subscribe if you haven't already. There's more content coming, more stories to share, more nights like this one. Take care of yourselves, be kind to each other, and remember that no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. Good night, everyone. For real this time. Sweet dreams and peaceful rest. Until next time.